Councilmember Driggs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, everybody. I want to emphasize first, I don't believe that anybody should suffer any kind of humiliation or abuse by virtue of gender issues. I think we should protect people who are exposed to that kind of abuse. But at the same time, I don't really think that's the issue here. And what troubles me about this whole conversation is the way we have been put on the defensive about trying to hold on to certain traditional values when it relates to bathrooms, because we haven't been given a choice. Anybody that felt that parts of this were acceptable and parts were not acceptable was told, this is how it has to be. And there is absolutely no accommodation in here for all the people that we heard from tonight that object to this. Now let's look specifically at the bathrooms, because that seems to be the flashpoint. And I want to emphasize there are other areas. I don't think a gay person should be denied service in a restaurant. If it was possible to have a conversation with my colleagues here on council about passing that ordinance, okay, but no. And last time when we came to vote on this thing, the issue actually arose of whether we would pass something that didn't cover the bathrooms but provided all these safeguards in other areas. And that failed because a couple of people wanted the bathrooms in there. And I believe they want the bathrooms in there because they recognize that that's actually a different conversation. If you're going to talk about the history of this country and the history of civil rights, and you're going to make comparisons between the experience of African Americans and gay people, the comparison stops when you get to the bathrooms. And there are 3 points I particularly want to emphasize why I think that the bathroom portion of this argument really doesn't hold water. For one, in my mind, and it's been said several times here tonight, this is not really about discrimination. The word discrimination is used because of its emotional power, but the truth is everybody is required to use the bathroom that corresponds to their biological gender. You can't get more equal than that. What we're really talking about here is whether or not special accommodation should be made for people who find themselves in the wrong place. And I have sympathy with them. I believe their life is difficult, and I think we should work to ensure their safety and to try to minimize their discomfort. But I think the argument that they're being discriminated against by being told that they have to obey the same rules when it comes to bathrooms is simply specious. They're the same bathrooms. They're in the same place. It's not the back of the bus. A speaker tonight actually did make that point. But we have to have that discrimination thing in order to fuel the kind of emotional argument. Let's talk about safety. Safety is something that has been highlighted both by victims of abuse of transgender people and LGBT people. It's also an issue that's been raised by a lot of opponents because they have fears about what will happen in bathrooms if the ordinance passes. In truth, the evidence that we have is not very conclusive. The supporters of the ordinance say there is no evidence at all of any heightened risk to people in bathrooms. And what we have in our book here is 10 cities out of 200 that have passed the ordinance to say, well, we haven't really had a problem. That's not very scientific. It's not much proof. And I haven't seen any evidence to support the allegation that the safety of transgender people is improved by the passage of this ordinance. So I don't think that there is a compelling objective safety argument, a fact-based, data-supported safety argument. And I recognize, before anybody objects, there are many reported instances of abusive behavior towards transgenders. I don't deny that. But what I'm saying is, specifically on the bathrooms, what has occurred and how has the safety of transgenders been improved by passing this ordinance? The fact is we already have laws that protect people from assault and battery, felony offense, much stronger than anything that we can legislate around this dais here. So people are also, when you think about it, they tend to be mean to each other. It's a fact of life. It's man's inhumanity to man. You get road rage, you get bar fights, you get all kinds of offensive behaviors of every which kind, and we can't legislate them all out of existence. Doesn't mean I think it's good, but I really think that to suggest that we can sort of eliminate bad behavior towards transgender people through the passage of this ordinance is very optimistic. So my feeling is that the real issue here is a matter of kind of comfort. And what I mean by that is we're talking about the comfort of transgender people being allowed to go to the room where they feel right, and the comfort of opponents of the ordinance who are afraid of some sort of safety issues for their children. There's also a privacy question. We haven't really talked about that much tonight, but a lot of people would like to see traditional gender values maintained. They would like to see the old-fashioned, this is where the boys are and this is where the girls are. They have no thought of trying to put anybody at a disadvantage. From the LGBT community, they were simply raised with the concept of this is where the boys are and this is where the girls are, and there is a lot of emotion and sensitivity around that, which I believe is being thrown under the bus in this conversation tonight. So for that reason, I can't vote for this ordinance. I can't support this. And it would have been nice to be able to have a conversation that was a little more inclusive of the views that we've heard tonight. But what we're looking at right now is entirely on one side of this argument, and I think there's good reason to believe that a large portion of our community doesn't want this. One last comment I wanted to make was the issue of Raleigh has been raised a couple of times, and the governor was quoted in the paper about what would happen. I think Governor McCrory cares deeply about Charlotte. He was mayor here for 14 years, elected 7 times. He has a feeling that he knows this city. He also knows the state of North Carolina. And it's worth noting that tonight of our speakers, when we got to the people who are not from Charlotte, the balance shifted pretty decisively against the ordinance. And it's a reflection of the fact that Charlotte is a bit different from the surrounding area, but we have to also be mindful of the fact that we have a great deal of influence that goes beyond the city boundaries. We are the core of an MSA of 2.3 million people, and I think what we saw tonight is that a lot of the people who don't live within the limits of the city are worried about coming here to shop or commuting here and represent a different attitude towards the ordinance and the people who live here. And I think when the governor spoke out against it, he did out of his own personal conviction that traditional gender values deserve to be defended, and also his perception that the state in which we live and the people in our state government are not entirely with us on this thing. And so for him to point out the fact that since we are in a Dillon rule state and the state legislature does control what happens in North Carolina, the city attorney has argued that city council has the authority to pass this, even though that's been challenged by a member of the General Assembly. I would argue, yes, we have the authority because the General Assembly gave it to us, and they could take it away again. And I bring up these issues in my capacity as the chairman of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee and as a representative of the party that has the majority in Raleigh but the minority here. We should be a little more thoughtful about trying to get along with our neighbors and in the context of our state. So, again, my main 3 points are I don't think this is discrimination. I don't think the safety issue has been proven sufficiently to support the decision we're talking about making tonight. And I think a lot of people who are only motivated by traditional values of gender are just being ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Driggs. Councilmember Autry.
Well, thank you, Mayor.